The night had the quiet of an old memory, as if the plains themselves were holding their breath to see what might unfold when a lone girl stepped into the world's coldest hour. Ahiana Rainwalker, aged 20, walked the moon-swept trail with her arms wrapped tight around her trembling ribs, her long dark hair clinging damply to her cheek. The sky was bruised with drifting clouds, and she followed the faint glow of a cabin lantern as though it were the last star left to guide the lost. Her thin traditional dress fluttered with every sharp breath, the beaded patterns brushing her cold skin like reminders of a home she no longer dared return to. She wondered if the man inside would turn her away like all the others, yet something in the night felt curious, almost urging her forward, and she found herself hoping the wind knew what she didn't dare say aloud. She reached the wooden cabin and stood before the door that looked older than her fears. Her hand lifted, hesitated, then fell. She tried again, fingers grazing the wood as if seeking permission before she finally knocked. The sound was soft, so small it felt swallowed by the dark. For a heartbeat, she considered running back into the night, disappearing before rejection could reach her. But her knees were too weak, her spirit too exhausted, and somewhere behind the door she heard a boot scraping the floorboards, and she felt the fragile edge of possibility tremble in her chest. Wyatt Derlin, age 30, opened the door with the slow caution of a man who had spent too many years expecting trouble. The lantern behind him stretched his giant frame across the threshold, broad shoulders outlined in gold light. His voice, usually steady, caught for a moment when he saw her, this too slim girl standing in the cold like a ghost made of breath and moonlight. She bowed her head, unable to meet the eyes of someone who might send her away, and whispered, "Please, if there's just a corner where I may sleep." The words crumbled halfway, betraying the hours of fear that had led her here. Wyatt did not speak right away, not because he doubted her, but because something in her trembling silhouette pierced a part of him he had kept quiet for years, and he wondered why this stranger felt like someone he already needed to protect. He stepped aside without a word, letting the warm light spill gently over her. She entered with careful footsteps, as though afraid she might break something simply by existing. Wyatt noticed how she kept her eyes on the floor, clutching the frayed edges of her dress to still her shaking hands. She moved toward the hearth on instinct, drawn to the promise of heat. The fire glowed orange, softening the sharp angles of her face and revealing how many tears had dried along her cheekbones. She murmured a thank you that barely rose above the crackling flames, and Wyatt found himself watching the way she breathed, uneven, cautious, like someone who had forgotten how to trust the world. Her fragility tugged at him in a way he hadn't expected, and for the first time in a long while, he felt his solitude shift. Ahiana warmed her hands, fingers trembling like leaves caught in a winter gust. In the fragile safety of the firelight, she managed to speak a few words about why she had come. She told him of the rancher who accused her of trespassing, the sheriff who looked at her with suspicion instead of mercy, the shouts that chased her into the night. But she left out the deeper wounds, the ones lodged too far inside her to release yet. Wyatt listened without interrupting, his expression steady, the firelight flickering in his eyes like he was absorbing every unspoken truth. She expected judgment, but all she found was quiet understanding, the kind that made her chest ache with relief. She dared a glance at him then, and his gentle stillness almost unraveled her, and she wondered when kindness had begun to feel like danger. The morning arrived sharp and unforgiving. The sunlight cut across the plains as if trying to expose anything that sought to hide. Sheriff Tomlin rode up, dust swirling around his boots as he dismounted. He asked why a native girl had been seen near the ridge last night, his tone thick with accusation. Wyatt stepped forward before Ahiana could speak, a wall of height and resolve. "She stays here," he said, voice low but thunderous, leaving no room for doubt. Ahiana felt something warm bloom under her ribs, confusion mixed with gratitude, strange and unfamiliar. The sheriff narrowed his eyes, warning Wyatt that keeping her would stir unnecessary trouble, but Wyatt didn't flinch. When the sheriff finally rode away, Ahiana exhaled a shaky breath she didn't know she had been holding, and she wondered why this stranger believed in her more than anyone else ever had. Days passed in quiet rhythms, each moment weaving something soft between them. Wyatt left warm bread on her bedside table each morning without comment, and Ahiana secretly stitched a tear in his coat where the fabric had worn thin. He taught her how to guide a gentle mare by touching its mane lightly, and she taught him to braid a feather charm meant for protection. They learned each other through gestures, not words, through the way he lingered near her as though pulled by a gravity he didn't question, and through the way she slowly began to walk with a little more steadiness, as if someone had finally allowed her to exist in peace. Their laughter, rare at first, came like sunlight breaking through clouds, surprising them both. But even as warmth bloomed quietly between them, neither dared name it, and the unspoken truth deepened like an undercurrent they both felt but feared to disturb. Rumors, however, travel faster than tenderness. Ezra Pike began whispering that Wyatt was harboring a wild girl, stirring ugly curiosity in the town. Betty Lane, the saloon girl with sharp eyes, pulled Ahiana aside during a supply run and warned her gently that every step she took was watched. The weight of judgment pressed against Ahiana until she felt breathless. One night, unable to bear the fear of ruining Wyatt's life, she decided to leave. She walked to the river, heart aching with every step, telling herself he would be better without her. But Wyatt found her standing at the water's edge, shoulders shaking as she whispered, "I don't want to be a burden." Her voice cracked on the last word. Wyatt knelt beside her, his hand hovering near hers, not touching until she leaned into it. "You're not a burden," he said softly. "You're someone who deserves to be safe." Her tears fell into the river with soft, trembling sound, and she wondered how much more her heart could bear before it shattered or healed. A storm rolled over the plains that night, rain pounding the cabin roof like 1,000 restless memories. Lightning illuminated their silhouettes as they sat by the hearth, close enough to feel each other's warmth. Ahiana shared pieces of her childhood. The fear, the loneliness, the belief that she was someone meant only to survive, never to be cherished. Wyatt listened, his chest tightening at every fragile word. When thunder cracked so loudly the windows rattled, she startled, and he instinctively wrapped an arm around her. It wasn't bold or urgent, just steady, protective, the kind of embrace that reminded her she existed beyond fear. She rested her forehead against his chest, feeling the slow, grounding rhythm of his heartbeat. When their eyes met, neither looked away. The moment hummed with a quiet inevitability, and the storm outside softened into a distant echo. Wyatt didn't propose in a grand way. He simply looked at her one morning, his voice rough with emotion, and said, "Stay. Not just because you need shelter, but because you are someone I want beside me. Someone I want to call mine, if you choose it." Ahiana felt her breath catch in her throat. She lifted a hand to his cheek, fingers trembling, and whispered, "Only if I may call you mine as well." He nodded, the smallest smile touching his lips. Their promise settled between them like a warm sunrise, and Ahiana felt something inside her finally begin to mend. They married by the riverbank at dusk, with Pastor Willoughby speaking vows that drifted into the wind like ancient blessings. Ahiana wore her beaded dress with brown feathers, shimmering softly under the dying light. Wyatt stood tall beside her, his hands shaking as he held hers. When they spoke their vows, she promised to walk beside him with courage, and he promised to protect her with gentleness. When Wyatt gave her his name, Ahiana Rainwalker Durlin, the moment felt carved into the bones of the earth. Their kiss was shy at first, then full of certainty. The river glowed with their reflection, and the world seemed to pause, as though reverent to their love. But peace is never welcomed by everyone. Sheriff Tomlin returned soon after the ceremony, claiming their marriage was improper and dangerous for town order. His words carried the echo of old prejudice. Wyatt stood firm, but Ezra Pike stepped forward, hatred in his eyes. When words failed him, he pulled out a gun. Ahiana instinctively moved in front of Wyatt, her arms out slightly, heart wild with fear. Her bravery stunned everyone into stillness. Wyatt eased around her, hands lifted, voice steady as he told Ezra to put the weapon down. Betty Lane burst from the saloon, shouting for Ezra to stop. Her voice, trembling with courage, started a ripple. People emerged from doorways, whispering that the couple deserved peace. The sheriff looked around, realizing the town was no longer behind him. Ezra lowered his gun reluctantly, bitterness draining from his stance. The sheriff muttered a warning and walked away. Wyatt pulled Ahiana into his arms, her breath shaking against his chest, and she clung to him as if holding onto the life they had fought so hard to build. Life softened after that day. Ahiana tended to a small garden behind the cabin, her hands finally steady enough to nurture life again. Wyatt taught her wood carving and how to recognize the first signs of rain by the scent of the wind. They walked through town together, and though some judgment lingered in certain glances, it no longer defined her. She was Wyatt's wife, yes, but she was also Ahiana Rainwalker Durlin, a woman who had learned to reclaim her dignity. Their nights were peaceful, their days warm with shared laughter, and the corner of shelter she once begged for became a home shaped by love. Each evening they fell asleep with gratitude, for the night that brought her to his door, for the man who chose her, and for the life they chose together and the future that waited quietly just beyond the plains. And if you listen closely to the wind, it still carries their story, a reminder that sometimes the world gives you less than you deserve until the moment it decides to give you everything. Perhaps you have felt nights like hers, standing in the cold with hope trembling inside you. Let this memory whisper to you that dignity often arrives quietly, like a soft knock on a stranger's door. You are not the shadows that tried to swallow your light. You are the courage that survived. And somewhere ahead, a door will open for you too, and you will walk through it with the strength of someone finally seen.